Hi everyone and welcome to another month in review. So in this series I talk about all the new to me board games I played during the previous month and I rank them from my least favourite up to my most favourite. I have 20 new board games that I've played this month, with, as usual, a big variation in the types of games. And I have to say, this month has been a real high quality month for me. I played a lot of good games. Two of these games are a bit of a joke really because they are kids games, but I've included them on the list nonetheless. Before I get started on these 20 games, I want to give a shout out to the show's sponsor, Kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer here in the UK, and if you use my link in the show notes, you can get 5% off your first order. But without further ado, let's get started on the list. Okay, so at number 20 I have Dragon Chase, which is the first of the two kids games that I played this month, and this is a bare bones roll and move game. You're just rolling a die and moving your piece that many spaces. Some of the spaces you land on will give you a little boost or a little punishment. But the gimmick of this game is that when you roll a certain face on that die, then you're going to press this button on this big animated dragon, and the dragon is going to move around and its articulated neck might knock your player piece over, making you start again at the beginning. So very silly fun, but you know what? There was actually some legitimate exciting moments in this one, and if you embrace the carnage, you could extract some fun from it, and I can certainly see why younger children would like it. At number 19, I have the second of the two kids games that I played this month, and this is Dodo. So Dodo has one of the coolest table presences that I've ever seen in a game. So this has this kind of big tree structure, and on top of that it has one of the coolest board game components that I've ever seen, as you have this dodo egg that goes in the top of the structure. And the idea is that very slowly this dodo egg will be rolling down these kind of guttering strips of cardboard, and you would be playing this matching game trying to match these symbols with these new strips and match them up by the time that the dodo egg rolls off the last one. So you're under a lot of pressure and just doing a simple memory game and hopefully get there in time by the time the dodo egg gets to the next section. That's pretty much the gist of the game. Another one I can completely see why kids would be excited by this one, and you can actually slightly alter the difficulty based on the age groups. You know, silly fun. It is a bit of a one-trick pony, but it worked, and again, that dodo egg was pretty damn cool. At number 18, I have Madam Ching by Bruno Cathala. This is a kind of a hybrid card and board game, as you have a bunch of ships, and the idea is you want to be sailing across the board, not only horizontally, but diagonally as well, and trying to manage your hand of cards and know when to stop, because where you stop is going to give you a number of points. However, you only have a very limited hand of cards, and you can only ever play cards in sequence going from low to high. And after each card you play, you're going to draw a new one, which means that your kind of options are going to get squeezed and squeezed and squeezed as the numbers get higher and higher. But the kind of trick with this game was that you could only ever start your next kind of voyage, I suppose, from the cards you have remaining in your hand. So as you're kind of ending one voyage, you want to be filling your hands up with kind of lower valued cards for your next voyage, so it gives you a bit of a, you know, a spring in your step for the next time and gives you a better boost to collect higher points. So it was quite a unique concept there. It almost reminded me of a game like Ohanami, where again your margins get squeezed as the game goes on. So I like that concept. However, as with a lot of Cathala games, they don't tend to gel with my taste too well. And I thought my main kind of thing that detracted me from this game was that it was almost anticlimactic, because you could pretty much go quite far straight from the get-go without having to build up any powers or anything. So what it meant was, towards the end of the game, only the lower valued tiles were available, and it kind of felt like it should be the other way around. You get better and better as the game goes on, rather than the rewards getting smaller and smaller. I thought also the game went on a little bit too long, and there was some pretty nasty take-that cards, and all in all, it just wasn't quite a game for me. At number 17, I have Pay Dirt. Now, this was a game I certainly wanted to like because I love the kind of setting and the theme of this game, as we are digging up earth and trying to mine gold. And this is like a pretty simple engine building game, as you are placing workers on not only on your player board, but also on this main board to acquire new tiles or to trade gold in for money, which I thought was a cool concept, because gold is ultimately your victory condition, but you need money to build a better engine, so that trade-off was quite interesting. But this game had some pretty significant flaws for me, because number one, you could only ever build an engine of 2 cards really, which was very limiting. It didn't really feel like you can get, you know, get much going. Also, that all the kind of tiles and stuff you would collect throughout the game weren't layered, so it felt like all the best tiles could come out straight away. You could buy all the cards you wanted, and then you're set for the rest of the game, and then you just go through the motions of using these workers to pull these tiles across your board, basically, to try and get the gold from them. The gold was a little bit swingy because some of them give you more gold than others, but most of that I could forgive, to be honest. The thing that I could not forgive was these punishment cards. I think they're called hardships, which was the most kind of ham-fisted, or the most clumsy attempt of a catch-up mechanism that I think I've ever seen in my life. So basically, whoever's winning at the game gets hit with these really punishing cards that can completely just eliminate you from the next round and leave you with very little options. And when that happens to you time after time after time, it felt like, what's the point in even trying to win until the very end? Because you're just going to get absolutely battered by the game. At number 16, I have Mining Colony by Dr. Steve Finn. So this is a small box polyomino style game. As you are drafting these different tiles and different resources, I'm using this kind of bidding system where the higher number you bid, you're going to get first dibs on the tiles out there. But I did like the fact that when you draft things, you actually draft things in bulk. So there might be something that you really want, but that might come with something that you're not too fussed about. And I generally like it when games do that. And the rest of the game, you're just building up your little player board, and you have to build a foundation, and then you have to lie the different kind of resources on top of it, trying to create gaps in between things, just the right amount, so that you can get more kind of tokens and stuff onto your board and get more points. A simple concept being done time and time again, but it works generally well. I think other games have done this a lot better, simple polyomino style games, and this one was just slightly subpar, and I thought the game in its entirety was quite busy because there was a bunch of resources and tokens and things that just felt a bit too convoluted and a bit messy for the style of game it was. It's just too many components, I think, and that was a bit of it did take away from the experience a bit from me, but it was fine, but ultimately very forgettable. At number 15, I have Robo Rally. So this is a very chaotic programming style game, as you have control of your own robots. And the idea is that all the players are trying to reach these 3 checkpoints before the other players do. And you're going to do that by programming your robot and playing these cards on your player board and then revealing them at the same time. And these cards are going to be very simple instructions, such as moving forward, doing a U-turn, turning left, turning right, or even moving backwards. But the issue is that when you resolve these cards, they have an initiative order assigned to them, meaning that obviously some cards are going to get resolved quicker than others. But it also means that you can actually push people and kind of shove them out of the way, meaning that their programming is going to go completely kind of not as planned. And that is kind of amplified by the fact there are like conveyor belts and traps all over the board, so that if you make one wrong move, you could go walking straight into a pit or and completely kind of derail yourself and slow yourself down. So it was very chaotic, and this is definitely one of those games where you have to embrace that idea of things not going to plan. You're not going to be able to very carefully map things out. And if you're playing this in the right spirits with a higher player count, then I can certainly see some enjoyment to be had here. I've only actually played this once so far at 3 players, so I definitely want to make it clear that this is a first impressions review here. But I'm looking forward to trying it at the maximum playing count and just going full on, just embracing that carnage. At number 14, I have Welcome to Dino World. So this is another simple roll and write style game, and this is all about kind of making your own little Jurassic Park, I suppose. And you're going to do that by drawing these enclosures and getting dinosaurs into those enclosures. Dinosaurs will give you more points as public objectives as well as endgame scoring. The thing that made this game unique is the fact that you had to put these power stations down, or generators, and that was kind of where the puzzle lied, because you could place these generators in convenient places so that they can actually power multiple cages at once to make sure all your dinosaurs are secure. And I did like that idea of trying to map that out. I thought that some of the drawing in this game was a bit not fiddly, but a bit time consuming at time, because you had to very carefully differentiate all the different dinosaurs, which meant that sometimes you just ended up writing like the letter of the dinosaurs in, which kind of dragged you out of the immersion a bit. But all in all, a solid roll and write style game, and one that I would certainly play again. At number 13, I have Steamworks, which is another game where on paper it sounds so cool because this is like a worker placement engine building hybrid where you are actually building the worker placement spots as the game goes on. You're going to have 3 different types of energy in this game. You've got like gears, you've got electricity, and I believe it's steam. And what you're going to do is that you're going to basically put these tiles on the board, connect things to each other, which means that you're going to get better and better rewards by placing your workers on them. And it also has some cool player interaction where you could actually use other players' worker placement spots. And if you do so, the player who built the machine is going to get a victory point. So it kind of had that push and pull of wanting to use your own cool machines, but also almost inviting other people to get your machines because you get compensated for that. Now, love the idea of it, and mechanically it works perfectly fine and no issues at all. However, I did feel like the vibe of the game and the output from those machines didn't quite feel right, and it didn't quite hit those kind of peaks that I would have wanted it to. It felt like a low scoring, a bit of a disjointed and bitty game rather than just giving you that big satisfying output when you use a powerful machine. So I like the idea, but in its execution it wasn't quite there for me, and it was also like in terms of being ergonomic or being convenient to play, it wasn't quite there because there ended up being worker placement slots all over the board, and just looking at it all and keeping track of everything was quite difficult, especially considering that the iconography and the tiles were quite small. At number 12, I have Dice Hospital, which is a rather simple dice manipulation style game. And in this game, the dice actually represent patience, and the lower pip values on those dice are going to represent patience pretty much on death's door, and the higher pip values are going to be a lot more healthy. And the idea is you're going to use your workers and allocate them to these different spots, and all of the idea of increasing the health of your patients, of course. But every round you have a mandatory draft, meaning that you have to keep on intaking patients, and if you do not have the room for them, then you're going to suffer negative points. The game flowed very well, very little downtime. However, I did have quite a distinct problem with the game, which is this scoring system. I didn't quite understand it because in this game, if you end up curing a bunch of patients at the same time, you get compensated a lot more than if you do them gradually. And I didn't quite understand why that was. Like, for example, if I cured 1 patient, then I only get 1 point. But if I say cured 5, 6, 7 patients at once, you can get like 20 points or something. So why is it worth more points if you do them all at the same time? It just didn't quite make sense to me, especially considering if you are slower, you're going to get punished by default anyway, because you're not going to have the space to move the patients into your hospital. So that just felt a bit disjointed and didn't quite make sense. But the rest of the game I thought was nice. It was a pleasant game, and I'd play it again. At number 11, I have Tiny Towns, which I have to say was definitely one of the biggest pleasant surprises for me of the month. I wasn't quite sure what to expect from this one. I had that kind of feeling that this might be a bit too light and a bit too entry level for me, where in reality the rules are as simple as it gets, but the gameplay is actually pretty crunchy and can be pretty damn agonising at times, where all you're going to do on your turn is that you're going to draft or pick a coloured cube and put it somewhere on your board, and everybody else has to follow suit and also play a colour of that type, and it's going to go round and round just like that, meaning that you are often at the mercy of the other players selecting the cube that you're placing on your board. And the idea is that once you build a certain formation of colours of these cubes, you can erect buildings on those spaces. However, the footprint of the cubes you have to put down are much bigger than the buildings, meaning that the grid gets gobbled up really quickly and your options very quickly run out, especially as the game develops. And I love the way that you have to keep playing until you cannot play anymore. And the idea is that once you build these buildings, they all score in different ways based on a spatial puzzle, which we've seen, in a lot of other games. But again, that unique thing is about how you choose those tokens or these cubes and how you place them down. I thought it worked very well, and there's some good variability in terms of all the different buildings you can play. We only played with the base game, and it was, agonising enough at that level. So this is actually a game that, again, impressed me. I can certainly see why it's been successful. At number 10, I have the Taverns of Tiefenthal, which is another dice drafting style game and a bit of an engine builder as you are running a pub. And I love the player boards in this game. This might be one of my favourite examples of a player board that I've seen, where everything is upgradable. It's a kind of a hybrid of a dice drafter mixed with a deck builder, as at the start of your turn every game, you're going to play through this deck of cards that you've acquired throughout the game and keep on getting more and more bonuses as you do so. And it almost has this kind of, not push your luck mechanism, but an idea that you can keep playing until all your tables are filled with customers, and you can kind of manipulate that as the game goes on by padding out your deck and giving you more opportunities to build that engine up. And then what you're going to do is you're trying to again draft the right dice for you to trigger the different actions in your pub. All the idea is getting many victory points as you can, and you know what, it works. It's snappy. It's only plays out over a few rounds, and I found it engaging. I thought it was a bit lucky at times because often you'd have bad rounds, and sometimes when you had a bad round and other players had great rounds, it felt like, well, I'm a bit helpless here. But generally, more often than not, if you have a bad round now, you'll probably have a better round in the next turn or two, just by the way the decks play out. But you know what? It was pleasant. I wasn't quite sure that this is up there with the great dice drafters, but it's good for what it is, and I can certainly see the appeal of that hybrid deck building and dice placement style game. At number 9, I have Hippocrates by Alan Orban. So this is a game that I was very much looking forward to. And you can see here, ranking at number 9, it maybe didn't quite reach the levels I wanted it to. And if you want a full description of the game, I have released a review of this one already, so be sure to check that one out. But this is a game about, much like Dice Hospital, about trying to take in patients and try to cure them. However, this one is a lot more Eurofied than a game like Dice Hospital, where you are acquiring these different patients with this kind of quite a convoluted drafting system. And then you are acquiring all the different kind of potions and things to try and cure those patients, including the doctors that could administer those potions. And after that, you are playing a rather cool little puzzle game as you are mapping out these doctor tiles with these with the patients, and also managing that with your resources that you've acquired throughout the game. And that has a very cool spatial puzzle, because some of these doctors can cure multiple types of patients, but if they can't cure the patients by themselves, then you can tag them onto other doctors as well, creating this kind of like a networking thing that's going on. It's very interesting, and that part of the game I thought was really cool, and I'd love to see it explored further. The rest of the game, though, it really did detract from that main part, because it very much felt like a game of admin and housekeeping, especially because if you weren't playing this at the full player count of 4 players, then you replace the real players with dummy players. So if you're playing with 2 players, you can be playing with 2 dummy players as well, just to proxy the initiative order and things to gobble up tiles on the board. And that felt like a lot of work, and it felt like you're constantly just moving things around and shuffling things and playing dummy players rather than focusing on your own game. So sadly, that did knock it down a bit for me. But again, that core experience of the of that networking mechanism was great. At number 8, I have Stroganov by Andreas Stedding. And to be honest, if I did not know that this game was by Stedding, I would have been quite surprised to hear that, because for me, normally his games have quite a distinct mechanism about them, and the rest of the game is built around that. Whereas in Stroganov, it definitely doesn't feel like that is the case, because it feels like it's a bunch more of disjointed mechanisms patched together to make the final product. And I actually don't mean that negatively, because I think that the final product is better than the sum of its parts, if that makes sense. So this one is essentially a time track style game. You're moving your piece from left to right, visiting different tiles as you go, and collecting furs, trading those furs in to get engine building benefits, as well as trying to aim towards getting victory points. This is definitely one of those games where it requires about half the game or a quarter of the game to find your bearings, to understand how things fit together, because it feels like you're going through the motions at times. And when you start to realise how you can combo things, it starts to become a lot more enjoyable, and the decisions start to shine through a bit more. So I actually did enjoy this one. It was actually kind of better than I thought it would be, considering some of the mixed reviews and mixed impressions it had. But it works. But for me, I think its downfall is that it does not stand out from the pack. It feels quite, again, it feels like a mishmash of mechanisms, rather than thinking, this is what Stroganov is about. This is why you want to play Stroganov. And when a game lacks that, again, that unique identity, they tend to fade into obscurity. And I think that's going to be the case with Stroganov. At number 7, I have Chocolate Factory, which I have to say was another pleasant surprise for me. So this is a kind of a hybrid drafting and engine building style game, but for me is all about that engine building and the way it works, the way it's executed, because you have this, or on your player boards, you have a conveyor belt system which can fit in these 4 tiles. And what you're doing is you're loading these resources onto these tiles, which are all different types of chocolate. And when you shuffle them along, you can activate these different machines to the vertical or south of that conveyor belt spot, and pay coal in order to convert them into other resources, or double them or triple them, all these different kind of things, with the aim of cashing them in to climb up these tracks or to complete contracts. So simple contract fulfillment in terms of the the way you generate points. And that was all fine, to be honest. The drafting side of things was just generic drafting. The point scoring was fine. But the engine building part I thought was pretty damn fantastic. And it had me completely engaged. And I was very impressed. So yeah, that is Chocolate Factory. Nice entry-level weight engine builder that's very logical. And that's what I liked about it. At number 6, I have Okanagan, which is a pretty simple, medium lightweight tile placement game mixed with a bit of area control and set collection. So in this game, you are placing tiles, and these tiles are made up of 4 different terrain types. You're sharing this board with all the other players, so you're all adding to the same map. But whenever you place a tile, you are forced to place one of your tokens down, which will kind of dictate the influence you have in those regions. But you have 3 different types of tokens you can place down. You have ones that will go 1 in every region on that tile, one that will go strength of 2 in 2 of those regions, or one that will be a strength of 3 in 1 of those regions. So I thought that trade-off was really well executed. And the idea is that when you close these regions, whoever wins it is going to get to select these different kind of tokens that are available on the regions you've just enclosed. If you're in second place and there's any tokens left, they can also get some tokens. All with the idea of trying to fill these objective cards that you got distributed out at the beginning of the game. And you even have a bit of mitigation where halfway through the game you can swap those objective cards. Another unique thing about this game was that if you end up losing a region in terms of influence, you actually get to select a bonus on the back of those tiles, which can be pretty significant. So sometimes you actually want to lose the regions so that you can get one of those bonuses. The reason why this one didn't quite reach the higher peaks of the list, it did very well, but it could have been at least a shield of quality, was because there is quite a lot of potential for swinginess in terms of the way the cards are distributed. Like, for example, a game I've just played this one, I had an objective card which I ended up doing really well on by acquiring a bunch of those tokens. It was a big payout. The other 2 I didn't do so well on, which was more than acceptable. But through sheer luck of a card draw, I ended up drawing another card which synergized perfectly with my best objective card, meaning that with a flick of a switch, I ended up doubling my points. And for me, when a game is that swingy and there's that much potential to determine the winner, all based on a luck of a card draw, that is going to sadly dampen the overall effect I have on the game, which could be a bit of a death knell for this game, which is such a shame because the rest of it is so well put together. At number 5, I have Alice's Garden, which by far is the biggest pleasant surprise for me of the month, and probably of quite some time actually, especially considering that the main mechanism of this game is polyomino tile placement, which generally is something that I'm very fatigued by, and just something I generally avoid because it just doesn't inspire me anymore. But for some reason, Alice's Garden has managed to completely contradict that and bypass all my reservations because it is just so damn charming and it works so well. So this one, of course, you are trying to fill up your player board of these polyomino shapes. However, on these polyomino tiles, you have different symbols, and all those symbols are going to score in different ways. So, for example, some might have little chess pieces on them, and if you get those chess pieces on the chess piece road in the center of your board, then they're going to be worth X amount of points. Or you want to get some symbols in columns, you want to get some in rows, but farther apart in rows. Some of them will give you bonus tiles. So you've got a bunch of different things you need to work towards. And I like the idea of how the game structure is broken down, because all you're going to do on your turn is you're going to pick the shape that you want. Then you're going to draw an amount of those shapes equal to the amount of players plus 1, I believe. And then everybody is going to, in turn order, draft one of those tiles and place it on their board. But what that means is that when it's not your turn, you are somewhat at the mercy of the other player of drafting a shape that you're not quite ready to place. But that mixed with the fact that the end game is triggered by the idea that as soon as somebody cannot place a shape, then it's over. So sometimes you're not quite ready for it to end, so you might choose shapes that you know everybody can place. And all this comes together very harmoniously in a very nice filler game that just impressed me. It works, it's smooth, and it's fun. Okay, so let's get into the top 4 games, and this is where my shields of quality start. So this is where the recommendations begin, I suppose. So at number 4, I have Tikal, which is a classic game by Kramer and Kiesling, and for some reason this game has managed to evade me all these years, despite me being a massive fan of their games and also being a fan of other games in the series. You know, Mexica is one of my favourite abstract games of all time. Tikal has a lot of shared DNA with a game like Mexica. It's an area control style game, and the main mechanism is that you have an allowance of action points. So I think it's 10 points you're allowed, and you're going to be using those points to move your workers around to establish these temples, which are the things you're kind of vying for in terms of area control. But I like the way that each round of this game you're going to be placing a new tile on the board, and you can orientate that in a way that suits you, because these tiles have different kind of notches on them, meaning that to go into those tiles, it's going to cost you more or less action points. And if you've already got like a bunch of workers in that spot already, and then you place a new tile, you can make it more difficult to people to come into your areas or the areas that you're trying to control, which I thought was quite clever. The rest of it is pretty much simple area majorities, but a small twist about this game that I tended, or actually really appreciated, was the scoring system, where when it comes to a scoring phase, rather than just being, freezing and everybody scoring as is, everybody scores as according to the current state of the board, you actually take your turn, do as much as you can, and then you score. And it will same will apply to the other players. It'll come to their turn, they'll start to move all their pieces around, and then they'll score. So it does mean that everybody can get full payout from the areas, which just it made the game feel a bit different, and it felt like you weren't so, you didn't quite turtle as much on certain regions, and it kind of give you a bit more inspiration to venture out and to try different things rather than just staying with what you've got and scoring the same thing again and again, which I thought was a really good touch. Can certainly see why this one's aged well. People still talk about it, people still appreciate it, and it's just a quality design. At number 3, I have Air, Land and Sea, Spies, Lies and Supplies. So this is a standalone expansion to the original Air, Land and Sea, which happens to be one of my favourite 2-player games of all time. This is really more of the same, but with slight tweaks on the original, different ways the cards interact and stuff. And if you're not familiar with the Air, Land and Sea series, it's basically a dueling style game as you are fighting or competing over 3 theatres of war through pretty clever and savvy card play, where every card you play has a straight value, which is your kind of bid to control that region, but it'll also have an ability on them which will completely mess with the other players and also kind of synergize with cards you are yet to play or have already played. Some of the best card synergies that I've ever seen, and it just comes together so well in such a tight little package. I'm not quite sure if this one's as good as the original, but I have played the original so much more. And that was mainly because of one card where you had to kind of name a card, and if you named that card, you could almost nullify it for your opponent. That one I wasn't so keen on, but the rest of it is just fantastic. And this game actually allows you to mix this one and the original together to make a grander game and play over 5 theatres of war rather than the usual 3. And I've yet to do that, and I'm very excited to do so. So hopefully I'm going to get a chance to do that soon and give my impressions. But still, an amazing game, one of the best 2-player games out there. At number 2, I have Vikings, which just so happens to be another game by Michael Kiesling. This guy really knows how to piece a game together. This is like a Gateway Plus level drafting / tile placement game, as you are acquiring these tiles and Vikings together as a pair and then putting them on your player board, building these islands from left to right and placing these Vikings of different colours on their designated islands. And all these Vikings have different roles, I suppose. Some of them are going to be pure scoring. Some of them are going to be protectors, which will protect you against these invading ships. If you successfully defend them, you will get a bonus such as money or points. If you don't successfully defend them, they can nullify a bunch of your other Vikings, which will mean you've wasted your time and effort to acquire them. The drafting system in this game is really interesting, as you have this kind of an action wheel which will designate all the prices of these pairs of tiles and Vikings. But as soon as the lower ones are taken by the players, the prices will rotate, making the more expensive ones cheaper in the future. And you can really use that as a way to interact with the other players by hoping that somebody will buy something cheaper so that you'll get the more expensive stuff for cheaper when it gets to your turn. It's something you really have to see to understand how it works. But I do like the efficiency in this game, where if you end up taking a Viking that you cannot place yet, you end up putting them in a separate area, then you have to acquire another type of Viking, a kind of boatsman, and a boat to sell them back to the islands where you want them to be. And that can be a bit of a time sink if you don't map it out correctly. wonderful, again, family weight style game. It's criminal why this game isn't in print anymore. This game, if it came out with just a re-release, I'm pretty confident this will be a smash hit. And finally, at number 1, and the best game that I played during the month is Calamala by Fabio Lopiano. So while this game might not be to everybody's taste in terms of its aesthetics, it certainly is that traditional dry, dusty beige Euro. Mechanically, this game is a thing of beauty, which is surprising considering in its essence it is a very simple area majority style game, but the way it works is just fascinating. So you're going to have a kind of randomly distributed bunch of actions on this action system, where if you place a disc in between these two tiles, you get to activate both of those tiles. And also, if anybody's gone to that spot before you and you place your disc on top of theirs, they will also get to take that action. So you have to be very careful about who's going to benefit from not only their actions, but from your actions as well. And what you're going to do is you're trying to fill up these different regions with your cubes. You're going to have to build boats. You're going to have to build little trade posts. But the way that these things score is great because randomly at the beginning of the game, all the different scoring criteria is going to get laid out, which means that at a glance you can see what's going to score and when. And what that means is that from the get-go, you get to strategize about how you want to approach the game. Where do you want to dip in? Where do you want to control? What's your long-term plan? When can you decide to stop investing in something? And for me, those kind of games just completely inspire me. And I love having that long-term planning rather than just tactical play. So yeah, honestly, this game is like the definition of elegance in a game. There's zero bloat in it, very few rules, but the decisions are there from the get-go. And I think this is a wonderfully designed game and a worthy winner of a number 1 spot in terms of being my game of the month. So there we have it. Those are the 20 new to me board games I played during the month. Hopefully you've enjoyed the video, and if you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to my channel and check out my other content too. Keep an eye out on my channel over the next few weeks or months or so, and I'm sure I'll be covering most of these games in a lot more thorough detail. But for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye bye.